Alright, so now that we've gone through the tour of the interface, let's just take a look at the preferences and menus here in Final Cut. So if we go up over here to Final Cut and Preferences, you will see a whole slew of different preference panels. Going here to General, we'll see it's basically just timecode display. I like to add subframes here if I'm going to be doing subframe editing later with audio. Down over here in editing, you have show detailed trimming feedback, which I like to keep on. The default duration for things like still images and transitions, and the default color correction, which I like to always change to color wheels because who uses a color board these days? Here in playback, I like to turn off background rendering. Background rendering basically means Final Cut starts making temporary files in the background when you don't edit for a number of seconds. You can set that setting here. This is a way to make larger, high-quality files play more smoothly in real time without creating proxies at the get-go. Import preferences are probably the most important ones you'll have to pay attention to, and this is where you would add various destinations to if you were going to share something out later on over here. Now hopping back into import settings here, we'll go over this more in detail later, but you can see here the keywords from Finder tags. This is the whole thing that we did before at the Finder level, adding metadata tags. And when you hover over anything in Final Cut Pro, it's usually pretty cool that they give you a little text here that tells you exactly what you're hovering over. If you go over here from folders and hover on top of that, it will tell you that select to create keyword collections named after imported folders. Always like to keep the IXML track names if available thing clicked. So if you're using something like a 633, it'll bring over the track names that you've entered in the device. And again, if you didn't know what that was, you could hover right over it and it will tell you select to assign IXML track name metadata as subroles when available. Now, like I said, we'll dive into these other things later on during the import. So last but not least, let's just click up over here into the menu row. Now there's lots of things in here, although not nearly as many as there are in a lot of other editing programs. But suffice it to say, most of the functions up here you're able to do in other ways, either through keyboard shortcuts or through another button somewhere on the interface. Now the two tips I will give you right away is if you're ever looking for a function or a certain item in the menu bar but can't seem to find it, you can always go down here to help into the search and you can type it in. So let's say I forgot where the voiceover tool is. You can just type in voiceover, boom, there it is. It shows you exactly where it is and highlights it for you. And last but not least, I do recommend going over here into Final Cut Pro Commands and Customize if you want to change or add various keyboard shortcuts. I also love my gaming mouse, which has over a dozen programmable buttons on it that I can assign various keyboard shortcuts to, making your editing a complete breeze. Now before we head on to the nitty-gritty and start importing footage, syncing things, and actually editing, it's important to cover some medium management and workflow information. So go ahead and move on to Lesson 5 and get a pen and paper ready to take some notes.